offered. We have Assemblyman Phil Palmesano live on the phone with us this morning to give us an update on how everything is going. Good morning. How are you doing? I know you've been up for a very long time at this point.
I'm doing okay. We have 3 bills left to go, and then we'll wrap it up. But I'm doing okay.
So the 3 bills that are left, what are those? Are there any that you could see as a win for us here in the Southern Tier?
No. The one bill I'll specifically talk about is the capital projects bill. This is a bill that would normally have any increase or funding level for the CHIPS program, which is money that goes right to our local municipalities to help fund local infrastructure. It also was a provision where they would put the extreme winter recovery money in. Unfortunately, this budget has as you mentioned, no increase in CHIPS funding for local municipalities. It's been held flat for 7 years. But in addition to sending billions of dollars downstate for the MTA, this budget contains a $65 million cut to the extreme winter recovery program, which provided direct assistance to local municipalities also for their local roads and bridges and culverts. I think that cut is unacceptable at a time when they're sending that type of money to the downstate. There's no parity, and I don't understand why my colleagues, especially my Democratic colleagues from upstate New York, would accept a cut like this to our local municipalities. And you take that on top of the AIM funding. Yes, it was restored to towns and villages, but the counties are going to lose money that was due to them from sales tax dollars. It's another unfunded mandate. I just think it just sends the wrong message. And that, coupled with a number of other provisions, really is pretty frustrating.
So this has been obviously a complaint in upstate New York for years. Do you see this as more of the same, downstate getting more priorities, or do you see this as kind of a shift even further in the direction of prioritizing downstate? Is this different than in past years?
Yes, it's much different. The biggest difference is now, in the past, the Republicans had control of the state Senate, so they would always be a balance to some of the progressive liberal policies that some people wanted to push. So they were a backstop to stop some of those policies, whether it's the DREAM Act, whether it's policies like that, some of the policies you've seen come out earlier, more gun control laws, things of that nature. That's what we've been seeing since the start of this session, and this budget is just a continuation of those liberal progressive policies which prioritize downstate over upstate, and there's no parity. And I think that's the frustration you see when you see more and more people leaving the state, and when you see more and more people talking about, why don't you divide upstate, downstate? I mean, it's things like that brings about that frustration that we hear over and over again. And I think this budget just reflects that frustration. You can see it in the prison closures from my perspective. To close 3 prisons, and this governor loves to go around and take ownership and brag about how many prisons he's closed, but he fails to take responsibility and ownership for the powder keg environment he's created. His policies and closures have created in our correctional facilities. Look at the Department of Corrections' own statistics. Assaults are up over the past 5 years. Inmate on staff assaults are up over 50%. Inmate on inmate assaults are up over 50%. And I've said over and over again, before we even talk about closing one additional prison, we should stop and end the dangerous practice of double bunking and double selling inmates. It's inhumane, but it leads to a violent situation and dangerous situation for our corrections officers who work a very dangerous job. That's a very concern. Another really liberal progressive policy that never went anywhere is now being worked on. They're going to create a commission to create a taxpayer-funded campaign system in New York State to the tune of $100 million annually. I don't think the people in the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes region, where I represent, want to see $100 million of their taxpayer dollars going to fund campaigns of political people that they might philosophically or ideologically disagree with.
Right.
I think we'd rather see that $100 million go for our roads and bridges, go for education, go for our libraries, or here's a crazy idea, let's give it back to the taxpayer. But that's the type of philosophy we're seeing in ideology in some of the proposals that are coming forward.
And are there other people in your corner? Are there other people in the legislature that are working to fight for upstate interests?
Oh, absolutely. I could say certainly I could say for sure the Assembly Republican Caucus and the Senate Republican Caucus are certainly bringing up these points. We brought these up in debates. That's why it's 6 o'clock in the morning. We haven't passed the bills yet because we're holding them accountable on these votes and on these these terrible policies they're putting in the budget. We're making them debate them, answer the tough questions, and we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to hold the majorities accountable for this and the governor accountable for this. This is bad policy. The governor can put out a statement saying this is great, but he's wrong. It's not great for the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes region, and it's not good for the taxpayers and residents, and they just think it's bad policy, and it's unfortunate. Like I said earlier, this is the worst budget I've seen since I've been up here, and I'm just very concerned about the direction our state's headed.
So two things. You said there's 3 more bills. So after those are deliberated, then what are the next steps? And if the budget does pass as is, what are your next steps to make it better for us here in the Southern Tier?
Well, after these 3 bills pass and the budget is passed, probably go home and get a little sleep. But then after that, continue the fight. These issues on infrastructure are important. Next year, we're going to be getting into a 5-year capital plan where there's an MTA capital plan, the 5-year capital plan for the MTA, and the DOT capital plan are due. We're going to be fighting for parity in those plans because we need to have parity. There was parity in the last 5-year capital plan we passed. We need to make sure. Listen, I'm supportive of the MTA and funding for the MTA, but we need to have parity with our roads and bridges in upstate New York and across this state. And when I talk about the CHIPS program, the MTA funding is the lifeblood of downstate transportation. I get that. But this CHIPS funding, this money that goes to our local governments, that's the lifeblood of some of our local municipalities for their infrastructure. Sometimes that's the only money they have to fix our local roads. And every dollar we spend in the CHIPS program is one less dollar that comes from the local property taxpayer. Our taxpayers deserve to have some of their state dollars come back to their local communities to fix their local roads and bridges. That's about economic development, it's safety. How many of us are putting our kids on a school bus this morning that are going over a local road or bridge? How many first responders are traveling over a local road or bridge to get to an emergency? This is serious stuff, and we need to keep beating the drum and keep speaking out, and that's what the people of the 132nd Assembly District have sent me to Albany to do. I will keep speaking out on their behalf and point out where I see flawed policies. When I think there's something good, I'll point it out, but I don't see a lot of good in this budget, and that's why I've been critical and voting no on the budget that I've seen in front of me.
All right, well, Assemblyman Palmesano, thank you so much for keeping us up to date and, of course, for quite literally working all day and all night for us here in the Southern Tier. So get home and get some sleep eventually.
Thank you very much.